So now I'm starting on YouTube. So it means that we can say a few words. Obviously, welcome to this match, the first match concerning your two teams. So today we have a debate match of the group phase of the Hague Inter-University Law Debate Tournament. We will have the first match for the University of the Free State, which is in South Africa, and the University of Colombo, which is in Sri Lanka. Today, with my colleague, Miss Urbanova, and as well Mr. Mutui and Miss Varley, will be hosting this match. We have the presence as well of one judge, one of the three judges, who will be assessing the performance of the two teams for this match. And just to finish, before giving the floor to my colleagues, the topic of this match will be about residing in a country for certain minimum period must be a prerequisite for any acquisition of property in that country. So now, I will give the floor to Mr. Mutui, host of the match.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Jacqueline Mutui. I am a law student at the Hague University of Applied Sciences, and I will be hosting today's match. So the timekeeper is Elise Varlet, a law student also at University of Lille. And I'm also accompanied by Anna Maria Urbanova and Mr. Aurélien Lorange, who are the co-founders of the Carax Foundation and of this tournament. But now I would like you to know a bit more about today's participants, starting with Metmutu Abe Kramer. Can you briefly introduce yourself, please?
Hello. I'm Metmutu Abe Kramer from the University of Colombo, and I'm a final year undergraduate of the Faculty of Law, University of Colombo.
Mr. Offense Sanye.
Good day, everyone, honorable judges, host. My name is Offense Nzane. I am finally a student in the study of law in the University of the Free State in South Africa.
Mr. Mutui?
Yes.
Yes, so just continue, yes.
Yes. So, Mr. Kalana Herat, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Kalana Herat, an undergrad law student of the second year at the University of Colombo in Sri Lanka. I hope I'm visible and audible today as well. Bonjour, Monsieur Larange.
Bonjour.
Yeah. And Mokadi Hamatri, sorry. Can you also open your camera, if possible?
I do not know what's happening with my camera right now. I'm utilizing my phone. My laptop kept me doing problems to me, so I'm unable to view my camera at this moment.
All right. Well, it's also fine. So, can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Mokadi Kevin Ramadzi. I'm an undergraduate student from the University of Free State.
Thank you. And last but not least, Tarushi Kamage.
Hello everyone, I'm Tarushi Kamage, currently a final year undergraduate at the Faculty of Law from University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you. Now that all the contestants have been presented, now I will give the floor to Mr. Larange to determine the position of each team.
Yes, so I will share my screen. You will see a wheel with the positions in favor and against for this topic that we have today. So normally now you should see on your screen, of course, the different positions. So there are two possibilities for the University of Colombo in favor or against, and two possibilities as well for the University of the Free State in favor and against. So we just click on the wheel, and we'll know which positions you will have for this match. So for this match, this is University of the Free State in South Africa will defend the position that residing in a country or for a certain minimum of period must be a prerequisite for any acquisition of property in that country. And on the other side, for the position against, that will be for the University of Colombo, meaning that residing in a country for a certain minimum of period must not be a prerequisite for an acquisition of property in that country. So my colleague Ms. Urbanova will be sharing the screen for the 5 minutes of internal preparation that you may have in order to review your argumentation based on these positions, and after we start the match.
Hi, so this is just for the purpose of clarifying. So the University of Colombo will be playing the opposition.
Against.
Yes. Right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much.
the time is up. I invite you to open your camera.
At a peripheral level, I just want to outline and intertwine my argument in comparison to the relevance of human rights and the provision of private property. As said by the International Bar Association, before the period of 1948, the right to property ceased to be a fundamental right. In line with the United Nations human rights, international law, human rights establishes an unequivocal that migrants and members of their families are the first and foremost human beings and the holders of universal human rights whose dignity and security require specific protection. Before 1948, in 1944, there was the Declaration of Philadelphia, which necessitated the objectives of human rights to social and economic planning. The protection of interests of the workers, as I recite the preamble of the International Labour Organization, it says the protection of the interest of workers when employed in other than their own countries. So right now, I propose a motion that the problem was and is that different legal systems applied to our systems or our current systems still have no equal protections for Black people or even minority groups. In South Africa, as you know, the willing buyer, the willing seller, if you want to buy the land, you'll be in the position to have the land. So as I go back to the migrant of workers, the International Labour Organization, in their own right, had their Declaration of Philadelphia. So when I intertwine and long in my argument with the words of the Articles of International Social Welfare of Dr. Harvey and Jacobs, it outlines that we as people, all right, it outlines that property right as human right. Property rights are the central and civic and political rights and have long been recognized. As I've mentioned, that during the 1940s, property right was the subject that was arising in that dispensation. Property right regimes can impede the realization of other human rights. You see that if you cannot access the land or property, you are subjected to exploitation, degradation, or any other unequal act of not being treated as a certain egalitarian in your society. So the housing market, the pillar of the economy, which other people now, they are making money out of property rights. So now the housing market, it's increasing the economy. The current restriction and the Residing Act are some of the quotas that restrict the fluency of the property of rights and the acquisition of that right. So property rights regimes, as I said, that they can impede other human rights because we realize that there are even many other human rights that are being violated. You know, immigrants or migrants, they are not treated as egalitarian people. It's supposed to be like the government was supposed, or any other state was supposed to give any other forms of housing or settlements for refugees or any other foreign people, as they refer to, before they even fix their papers in order to settle their citizenship to buy property. You only to find out that foreign people in many of the most countries, particularly in constitutional countries, they are adopting in the situation of a willing buyer, willing seller. If you have money, you have the right to buy the property. So I even use it as a globalization and the shift to a more decentralized economy. Because now, if you have no money, as I've said, you cannot access property or any other land. So in this case, I just want to mention that in our dispensation, as it's said by the International Journal of Social Welfare of Harvey and Jacobs, we need to look at property rights in our 21st century, because it as my research and my study has been said.
Okay. Now, University of Colombo, you have 4 minutes for your opening statement. You have the floor.
Before I start, may I know whether I'm audible?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. Good evening, dear judges and my friends on the proposition. I'm Metmuthu Abbe Vikrama, presenting the debate with my colleagues Tarushi Gamage and Kalana Herath. We make ourselves present here today to argue against the motion of residing in a country for a certain minimum period must be a prerequisite for any acquisition of property in that country. It is true that as a finite resource, the importance of land cannot be disregarded. However, if a country attempts to regulate and restrict the foreign ownership of property, such policy should satisfy two main conditions. Firstly, the policy has to be mechanically effective. In order to be mechanically effective, it has to avoid any loopholes by specifically and conclusively stating what it covers and how it would attain the ultimate objective through the said policy. Secondly, it has to be a legitimate policy deriving its authority in conformity with the established principles of law and humane values. We first hold that such a residence requirement would be mechanically ineffective since it would be heavily burdensome for a prospective buyer to spend their whole life and move to another unfamiliar nation simply for the sake of eligibility to buy a plot of land. Furthermore, such a requirement will inevitably be rigid because any flexibility of the rule would negate its purpose. Also, we observe that there are other alternatives which are more efficient and pragmatic to preserve the same interest. For instance, it could be the imposition of taxes or limiting the area that could be acquired by foreigners or conducting a thorough risk evaluation process, which are already in use in countries such as Norway and Canada. For example, the Canadian city, Vancouver, has recently introduced a 15% property tax on foreign home buyers. A critical flaw in this regulation, which makes it further mechanically ineffective, is that there is no rational relationship between the purpose of this law and a legitimate state interest. Secondly, to establish the point that this prerequisite of residence is ineffective in the sense of its legitimacy, we see that it is unnecessarily overriding the liberty and rights of non-citizens. As per Article 7 of the European Union's Fundamental Rights Charter, no person can be discriminated against on the grounds of his or her nationality. Nevertheless, by imposing such a requirement, it would ultimately result in the violation of foreigners' rights by inflexibly restricting their freedom of movement, which has to be protected by virtue of Article 13 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. According to Article 17 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the foreigner's right to property could be interfered with by imposing the residency prerequisite. Also, we must not disregard the right to engage in a fair competition. The necessity of adopting such a liberal approach, as we previously mentioned, has already been acknowledged by several countries such as Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Portugal, Netherlands, and Belgium. For instance, Germany is known to make no distinction between citizens and non-citizens in terms of property ownership. And in Belgium, the right to property is considered as a fundamental human right of Belgians and non-Belgians alike. Clearly, several factors will affect a common man seeking to obtain a roof over his head or to obtain a certain property. By adding this requisite, the stress has been compounded. Given the mechanical ineffectiveness and the cumbersome procedure it poses, it is questionable whether there's an ultimate necessity to place such a burden. Thank you.
Now the Free State University, you have the floor for your first rebuttal. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, esteemed judges. Good day, colleagues. I hear the argument which my learned opponent is making. On that topic, I have to first start by speaking about the economic ramification of such a flexible policy on residents. In each and every country, the priority of the country and the government of the country, they have an obligation to ensure that the economy of the country grows, develops, and is sustainable. Creating a very liberal or flexible policy on residence and acquisition of property will alter or interfere with this economic growth strategy of any country. If I hear the colleague also spoke about a fair competition. How is it a fair competition if migrant workers will come from different countries to actually acquire property in any country, not realizing the classifications and social classes of that country? If a middle class of one country migrate from country A to country B, not realizing that they're creating an influx on the middle classes, actually creating more pressure on the lower class of that country. The third point which I have to speak to is the issue of safety. If we actually allow a liberal or flexible policy on the acquisition of property, we forget measures of safety. Whenever we are actually speaking about this topic, that the acquisition of property, there should not be any minimum property. I mean, there should not be any minimum period. We always speak from the perspective of a benevolent man, forgetting that there are people with malafide intentions who can actually use this, who can use these policies against the interest of the country and safety. An example of such will be issues of creating shell corporations and buying properties with the intention of harboring your assets in a different country without an extradition treaty.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The University of Colombo, for your first rebuttal, you have 2 minutes.
Before I start my speech, can you confirm me whether I'm clearly audible?
Yes.
Perfect. Honorable judges, firstly, it was argued by our counterpart that the plight of economically weaker sections of the community can be reduced by restricting the foreign ownership of land by imposing the requirement of residence as a prerequisite, as the foreign ownership of land is ultimately causing the proliferation of housing prices and thereby affecting the rights of citizens of that particular country. But judges, however, it is questionable whether making residence as the prerequisite that will appreciably help to solve the problems of economically weaker sections of the community. Dear judges, we have already proved that this requirement of residence is merely a measure directed at an easily identifiable target to alleviate the frustration of attempting to solve a different problem. For an example, countries such as Hong Kong, Singapore, and United Kingdom, who have similar circumstances like other countries, have proved that the same issue of proliferation of housing prices due to acquisition of property by foreigners can be addressed by other ways, such as additional land tax surcharges, and thereby ensuring that foreign investors also contribute appropriately to the local infrastructure. For an example, England adopted this approach. Secondly, in responding to the argument of residence as a prerequisite to prevent illicit activities, judges, it must be noted that this is not the easiest or the quickest or the most efficient way to address this, but this prerequisite is the most hardest and would take the greatest amount of time and will very likely to be the most ineffective one. Why? Because countries like United Kingdom, Norway, and Canada is addressing the same issue using other methods. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the University of the Free State, you have the floor for your second rebuttal. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. My learned opponent here spoke about Article 17 of the United Nations. Due to the constraints of time, I will have to assume that we went through it. But I have to rebut the word arbitrary, because they center the argument around Article 17, and the word arbitrary means that the discrimination on the basis of random or random choices. So if you're going to use Article 17 as a basis of human rights and access to property, you're forgetting that Article 17 also speaks about that discrimination shouldn't be random or shouldn't be made of random choices. They also spoke about the contribution of foreigners and the 15% tax, which is paid, I believe, in Norway. The contribution of foreigners is a double-edged sword, meaning that it does contribute to the economy of that respective country. But equally, we should not overlook the amount of money foreigners take out of the country each and every year to their home countries. we should not forget the amount of foreigners who are actually allowed to acquire property without actually acquiring citizenship, and the contributions they are making to their home countries. An example of this, between the year of 2017 and 2019, in South Africa, foreigners alone exported 40 billion rands, which is the equivalent of about $2 billion out of South Africa. And that is just an issue of taxing foreigners. The safety aspect remains paramount, because I see that my opponents are not touching on the safety aspect, and countries without the extradition treaty allowing people without citizenship to acquire property. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The University of Colombo, you have the floor for your second rebuttal. You have 2 minutes.
Yes. Dear judges, the counterpart colleague mentioned about economic ramifications that could arise in the status quo, and also he mentioned that there are a lot of illegal things happening in the process of acquisition of property by foreign buyers. We totally agree with that point, but the issue with that is, by imposing the residence as a prerequisite wouldn't solve that problem at all, because that is not the most effective or the most viable way to achieve that target. We have already proved in this debate that there are other alternative ways to acquire the same interest without imposing the requirement of residence. Dear judges, when they propose such cumbersome regulations, such as imposing the requirement of residence as a prerequisite, the burden shifts back to them to justify this regulation in terms of local benefits and the unavailability of non-cumbersome alternatives to preserve the same interest adequately. If a country has certain valid concerns regarding their national security and safety, and also preservation of their social and cultural fabric, placing a limit on that area that could be acquired by non-citizens would be the most efficient way to do that, rather than imposing a residence as a prerequisite. Therefore, judges, imposing the requirement of residence is a way of dismissing others' right to enjoy property. The proposition team only spoke about the rights of citizens of that particular country. What about the rights of other people from other nations? After all, judges, the citizenship is an abstract and a very legal construct, where personhood is a fact. While considering the national personhood, the national security concerns and liberty of its own citizens, the state also should respect the equal dignity and human rights of other people, despite the title of citizenship.
Your time
Therefore,
is up.
judges, we are in the view of that imposing such cumbersome requirement is bad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now the conclusion of the University of the Free State. You have the floor. You have 2 minutes.
Due to technical issues, my colleague won't be able to close. Can I do the closing remarks? It won't be a problem.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. We must look at this issue in a holistic perspective and look at the fact that how will the acquisition of citizenship actually benefit all parties involved, not look at it from a single person's point of view. The citizenship is not an abstract legal term. It is more than that. If we look at the jurisprudence of citizenship, it is more than that. It also speaks to the patriotism aspect of this. If we look at a country like Saudi Arabia, I'm going to make a quick example about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was able to develop and actually expand as a global superpower, while actually being able to balance the issue of citizens and non-citizens not being able to acquire property. They were able to build, they were able to upscale with those certain measures and restrictions in place. Esteemed judges and esteemed colleagues, can we please, when doing or looking at this thing in a holistic point of view, remember why the restrictions of citizenships for acquisitions of property were placed in action for the first place. They were placed as a safety mechanism. they were placed as an economic growth and development mechanism. By us simply taking those two things away, we are actually forgoing the issue of safety and forgoing the issue of economic and development. Yes, there are other ways to go about this, but this one is the one which yields the most results in the time period and has proven consistently that this method actually achieves the intended goal on the intended target on economic growth and safety. Because if we see countries, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now the conclusion of the University of Colombo. You have 2 minutes.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes.
All right. Just a second. Dear judges and members of the opposition, I am overjoyed to be closing this debate, and as it has been quite a hearty debate and quite a good exchange of ideas. However, I must state that the proposition and their proposal is a human rights nightmare, to be honest with you. And that is, of course, because it violates no less than 4 human rights provisions of the United Nations Human Rights Declaration. And that is, of course, Article 13, 17, 21, and 27. Now, why does this violate Article 13? Article 13 is the provision that guarantees property rights. Hold on a second. Yes, sorry. Article 13 guarantees freedom of movement. Now, freedom of movement is obviously attacked by this provision that would, by this proposition that would force individuals from other nations to move and reside. And it also violates the United Nations Human Rights Declaration provision on the freedom of work, freedom of choice of work, as this would, of course, obstruct the range of work available to individuals that would reside in this new foreign nation. And of course, the opposition did point out certain points, and that is, of course, first, that this is duly compensated, individuals, and that the situation will be duly compensated because individuals will be who do wrong, who are wrongdoers, will be prevented from, continuing in their wrong deeds. However, this is a flawed argument. They did not show the logical steps necessary in how this would be, how this would prevent crime. This would not, of course, prevent crime. It would only bring the wrongdoers closer to your land. It would only bring wrongdoers, which is why I say that this is a human rights nightmare, as it attacks 4 human rights provisions and doesn't do what it aims to do. Thank you.
So this ends today's match. Congratulations and well done to you all. Now I would like to know your impression and would like to know what you thought about what you think about your own team and the opposite team. So I start with Mr. Herat. Can you reflect on your performance?
Yeah, well, I don't think that I, in fact, performed as or up to the standard that I did intend to perform. However, I was met with a very hearty opposition from the other side, and I would like to thank them. They did quite a great job at it, and their interest and vigor is truly admirable, as is the interest and vigor of my own teammates. And I thank the Corax Foundation and Monsieur Laurent for making this possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Offensin Tanya.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It was a very good debate. It was a great one. I'd like to thank the opposition for actually bringing it. It was an engaged and quite interesting conversation and a debate. It was interesting to actually hear the opposition's perspective on this matter, since you obviously do research for both sides. So you are very key and wary of the points you may be missing. So it's quite refreshing to hear what the opposition actually researched about and find out about and you missed. I'd also like to thank the foundation and the host for affording us the opportunity to present our views about such a matter. Thank you.
Okay. Taoshi Gamage, can you give an overall impression of your own performance of your team and of the opposite team?
Yes, first of all, I must be thankful to the Corax Foundation for organizing such a great tournament. And I am really grateful to participate in this tournament because it gives me the opportunity to connect with other nations as well and also to improve my knowledge on several legal areas.
Yes. Mr. Mokadi Ramatri?
No, thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank the opposition for their exuberant debating mentality. I love the way they're debating. Actually, it was first intensifying because I couldn't expect what we'd have in our disposal with a credible team like this one. But credit to them, and I give my other Leonard friend, Ofensensane, a very warm salute, even though we tried to maneuver our points, because we thought actually we'll be in the opposition side, you know. So we've agreed with the motion. Nonetheless, we thank the foundation and the host for hosting us, for nurturing our talents for the future. Thank you very much.
And last but not least, Ms. Metmutu Abeyu-Kramer.
First of all, I would thank the Corax Foundation. Yeah, so first of all, I thank the Corax Foundation for organizing such a tremendous debate. And I would also thank the opposition, which is the Free State of South Africa, their counterparts, who did a really brilliant job. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to one of the judges who will judge. Yes, we have a question. Mr. Ntali?
Good day. I just had an inquiry about the point progression system because I wasn't really clear on that after this. Apologies if it was mentioned and I missed it. Thank you.
So if you want, I can intervene quickly on this before giving the floor to the judge. So what will happen is that at the end of this match, the match that you had was on YouTube, so it means it can be watched and rewatched by the judge. You have 3 judges. One of them is Professor De Jesus Lima, who is in the room, and there are 2 others who will be watching as well the match. So you can get per judge maximum 100 points. This is the maximum. So Mr. De Jesus Lima will grade you out of 100 points. The 2 other judges as well, and we add up the points, and that makes your overall score for your team out of 300. And for the other team is the same. So it means Professor De Jesus Lima will be assessing exactly in the same way the other team. So that's why we give a bit of time to the judge for them to watch and rewatch the match when they have time. And then once it is done, we collect, of course, the points, and that gives us, of course, we compare the scores between the 2 teams. And at the same time, we receive the written feedback, the written form with the scores for each team, and that is sent by email to both teams. So you will receive the free forms from the free judge for your team, and the team of the University of Colombo will receive as well the free forms concerning their performance as well. Yeah? It will be after the weekend. Huh? So, yeah. So maybe I can give the floor to my colleague, Professor De Jesus Lima.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to listen to both teams and their argumentation. I was particularly impressed. I really liked the level of depth and information that was brought in the arguments. I liked also the level of courtesy and really engaging with the speech of the the counterpart that had just spoken, and I think that that made the debate flow in a way that is mature. So I particularly enjoyed that. I did enjoy the examples and the practical examples. One of the teams mentioned, for example, regarding property rights in different jurisdictions. I thought that absolutely added the level of professional savoir-faire, which I think is an absolute addition. I missed a little bit some devices in the debate bringing things to a more personal level. So sometimes this can make your argument a bit more compelling. So if you say, for example, that somebody talks about destitution. So imagine that somebody from a different country comes here and buys a parcel of land, and then that can generate destitution. How does that feel like being destitute? I think these things are important. So try to bring a little bit of a personal level, not too much, because that has to be the cherry on the cake, but that's important to make your argumentation strong, especially because many of you, most of you, will be engaging in the legal profession with other legal counsels. That's one thing, but very oftentimes with people who don't have our training. So we need to be able to connect with, let's say, the average men and women. So I think that would be an interesting addition. For the rest, it was a pleasure and an honor to have listened to you, and I wish you all the best of luck in the rest of the competition.
Thank you very much. So as mentioned, there will be a written feedback as well in the form filled by my colleague, because he will have a bit of time to rewatch if he wants to get a bit more precise in his assessment. And the two other judges will be watching, so that's why they are busy at this moment, but they will be watching the match on YouTube. I want to give the floor to my colleague, Ms. Urbanova, maybe to conclude.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you to both teams for your extensive research, and well done on the execution of your research and on the participation in the debate. It was a difficult topic indeed, and you've executed it really well. And thank you to our present judge and those who are not present currently as well for their time and review. Technical comments perhaps. In the beginning of the week, you will receive the scores. And the feedback will be directly provided to you via email. On the main social media channels, we'll also announce the results. And in the group phase, as you know, the two teams with the highest scores will then proceed into elimination phase, which starts in May. We look very much forward to your next matches, and hopefully we'll be also seeing you in the accompanying events. Perhaps one of the first ones being the one on 23rd on the soft skills for legal professionals. And of course, we very much look forward to your next matches.
Thank you. So thank you to all the students in Sri Lanka, in South Africa. Thank you, of course, to one of the judges and the other judge, but my colleague who is in the Netherlands, but from Brazil. And obviously, yeah, we are looking forward to see your next match because it's coming in 2 weeks for your group. And so thank you again for all your work and research. If you have any question, please do not hesitate to contact us as well by email, and we'll keep in touch as well for the results during the next days. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.